A soft hum filled the dimly lit room as Aminata, a seasoned investigative journalist, stared intently at her screen. The leaked intelligence file glowing before her eyes was explosive, more than she had ever dared imagine. It detailed a secret agreement struck between Ibrahim Traoré and French intelligence, a pact so clandestine it threatened to reshape Burkina Faso's very future. Before ascending to power, Traoré had agreed to grant France exclusive access to the nation's vast uranium reserves in exchange for covert military backing during his coup. The implications were staggering: sovereignty traded away for power. Outside, the bustling streets of Ouagadougou seemed oblivious to the storm brewing within the government's walls. But Aminata knew this secret wouldn't stay hidden for long. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The story was bigger than any one person. She prepared to break the news to the world, but also understood the risks. Powerful forces would try to silence her, protect their interests at any cost. The countdown to a national reckoning had begun. In the presidential palace, Traoré paced the marble floor, his thoughts a tempest of fear and calculation. The leak was no accident, it was an act of war. The man who had risen from the military ranks to the highest office knew his grip on power was slipping. His secret was exposed, and the people's fury was like wildfire waiting to be unleashed. Every ally around him whispered about damage control, but Traoré weighed his options carefully. Could he reveal the entire truth and risk further chaos? Or should he silence the whistleblowers, even if they were close allies? Traoré's inner circle was fracturing, paranoia seeping into every conversation. Meanwhile, outside the walls of power, protest plans were taking shape. The country was on the edge of upheaval, and the president had only hours to decide which path would secure his legacy, or end it forever. When the news broke on the evening broadcasts, outrage exploded across Burkina Faso. Citizens poured into the streets, their chants echoing through city squares and villages alike. No more puppets. No more betrayal, banners read. The uranium deal was not just a secret contract, it was a symbol of a broken promise, a betrayal of the people's trust in future. Families gathered around radios, and social media erupted with hashtags demanding justice. The young and old alike marched side by side, their voices united in anger. For decades, the shadow of foreign interference had loomed over Burkina Faso, but now the truth was undeniable. The fight for independence, dignity, and truth had found a new champion in the streets. Deep inside the presidential bunker, a meeting convened under tight security. Traoré sat at the head of a long table, flanked by ministers whose faces were grim masks. The leaked file was passed around, a poisoned chalice no one wanted to drink. Traoré's trusted security chief, Colonel Zongo, laid out a plan: find the leakers, silence them, and control the narrative before it spiraled out of control. But even within the room, suspicion lingered. Was there a mole? Could one of his closest advisors be feeding the truth to the public? The paranoia was suffocating, but the plan was set: deploy covert teams to track down the dissidents. In the race between truth and power, only one could emerge victorious. In the shadowy corridors of power, whispers grew louder. Some cabinet members questioned the wisdom of hiding the truth, fearing the country would unravel in chaos. Others urged Traoré to double down, to use force and propaganda to crush dissent. Madame Yarrow, the Minister of Energy, wrestled with her conscience. She had signed parts of the uranium deal but now feared the consequences. Her inner turmoil mirrored the nation's fracture. Allies turned to enemies, trust dissolved into suspicion. Amidst the tension, a small group of reformers quietly began planning to expose the entire network behind the pact. The seeds of rebellion were planted not only on the streets but within the very halls of government. As protests gained momentum, mysterious figures appeared at the nation's borders, foreign mercenaries sent to ensure the pact's secrets stayed buried. Their presence was an open threat, a warning to those who dared challenge the status quo. Armed and ruthless, they moved like shadows through the cities, hunting down activists and journalists. Reports of kidnappings and disappearances spread fear, but also steeled the resolve of the resistance. Citizens realized the battle was no longer just political. It was a fight for survival, for the soul of Burkina Faso itself. Aminata refused to be silenced. In a secure studio, she prepared a special broadcast, laying out the full scope of the French pact with unflinching detail. She knew the risks, she had already received threats, but the people deserved to know the truth. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke directly to the nation. This is not just a story about uranium or power. It's about who we are and what we will tolerate. We must stand united or fall divided. The broadcast went viral, igniting a firestorm of debate and solidarity that no force could extinguish. General Cohn, commander of the armed forces, faced a critical choice. Loyalty to the president or loyalty to the people? The military's role in the coup had been pivotal, but now the army's unity was crumbling. Some officers sided with Traore, others with the protesters, and a few sought to remain neutral. In a tense meeting, Cohn warned Traore that continued repression would fracture the military irreparably. The president's silence spoke volumes. The armed forces teetered on the edge of civil war, and the country held its breath. Violence erupted in the streets as protests clashed with security forces. Tear gas and rubber bullets failed to quell the unrest. Instead, the crackdown fueled more anger. The first casualties, students and workers, became martyrs, their stories spreading like wildfire. International media picked up the crisis, pressuring foreign governments to respond. The fragile peace shattered, replaced by a tense and dangerous standoff. Burkina Faso was at a crossroads, and the decisions made now would echo for generations. World leaders watched anxiously as the crisis deepened. France issued guarded statements, denying involvement but refusing to condemn the pact. Neighboring countries expressed concern, calling for calm and dialogue. The United Nations prepared to send observers. Meanwhile, hidden alliances shifted beneath the surface. Some foreign powers quietly supported Traore to maintain influence, others backed the protesters' calls for transparency and reform. The battle for Burkina Faso had become a proxy war on the international stage. The protests showed no sign of slowing. Across Burkina Faso, communities banded together, overcoming tribal and regional divides to stand united against corruption and foreign control. Roads were blocked, markets closed, and the nation's heartbeat echoed through chanting crowds. Social media became a powerful tool, connecting activists and sharing real-time footage of the uprising. The French pact was no longer a secret, it was a rallying cry. In the shadows, however, Traoré's regime tightened its grip. Emergency laws were declared, granting security forces sweeping powers to detain and suppress dissent. Yet every attempt to silence the people only fueled their resolve. Young leaders emerged, fearless and charismatic, inspiring their peers to continue the fight for justice and sovereignty. Among the protest leaders was Moussa, a former soldier turned activist. With a voice both commanding and compassionate, he spoke passionately about reclaiming Burkina Faso's future. Moussa's speeches galvanized crowds, weaving stories of past struggles with hope for a new era free from exploitation. His military background gave him insight into Traoré's tactics, allowing protesters to anticipate and avoid crackdowns. But Moussa's rise also put a target on his back. The regime's secret police hunted him relentlessly, turning neighbors into informants. Still, Moussa refused to hide. His presence was a beacon of courage, proving that one voice could echo louder than the guns aimed at the people. In a modest home on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, Aminata faced a heartbreaking divide. Her younger brother, Issa, was an officer in the Presidential Guard, sworn to protect Traoré. Their conversations grew tense and infrequent, each word heavy with the weight of opposing loyalties. Aminata believed in transparency and justice, Issa in duty and order. Their conflicting views mirrored a nation torn apart. Families, friends, and communities struggled to reconcile personal bonds with political realities. Yet beneath the surface, a silent hope lingered, perhaps the next conversation could heal more than just their family rift. In a dimly lit safe house, opposition leaders convened under tight security. They knew that winning the streets wasn't enough, a plan was needed to transition from revolt to governance. Among them was Fatou, a sharp strategist and former diplomat, who urged caution and unity. Fatou's vision was clear: expose the French pact, dismantle the corrupt regime, and build a transparent government that served the people, not foreign interests. The group drafted a manifesto, detailing demands for immediate reforms, fair elections,
and the establishment of a truth commission.
Their hope was fragile, but their resolve unbreakable.
Traoré's circle grew more paranoid by the day.
Allies disappeared overnight, suspected of treason or leaking information.
Colonel Zongo's ruthless purges spread fear, but also created cracks within the elite.
Some ministers began to question whether blind loyalty was worth the cost. In private, Traoré wrestled with his own conscience. He had once dreamed of leading Burkina Faso to greatness, but now felt trapped by his choices. The French pact had been a gamble, and now the stakes were life and death.
Desperation clouded his judgment as the walls closed in.
The military crisis deepened.
General Koné's warnings became reality as factions openly defied orders.
Some units refused to fire on protesters, while others engaged in brutal crackdowns. Tensions erupted into armed skirmishes, threatening to plunge the country into civil war. International mediators scrambled to intervene, but the damage was done. The army's fractures mirrored the nation's division. Kone sought a fragile middle path, keeping discipline while avoiding total collapse, but time was running out. Every casualty on the streets became a symbol of resistance.
Burkinabe mourned the loss of young lives, students, laborers, mothers and fathers, each story told with heartbreak and pride. Memorials sprung up overnight, transforming city squares into places of remembrance and resolve.
These martyrs were not forgotten. Their sacrifices galvanized the movement, turning despair into determination. As night fell, candles lit the darkness, a testament that hope refused to be extinguished. Behind closed doors in Paris, officials debated how to respond. The French government was caught between defending its interests and managing a growing international outcry. Pressure mounted from allies, activists, and global media to cut ties with Traoré's regime. Yet some advisors argued for quiet support, fearing that abrupt withdrawal could destabilize the region further. The debate was fierce, reflecting the complex web of diplomacy, economics, and history binding France and Burkina Faso. As the crisis deepened, a decisive moment approached. A mass protest was planned for the capital, demanding Traoré's immediate resignation and the annulment of the French pact.
The entire nation watched, breath held, as the day dawned.
Protesters flooded the streets in numbers never before seen.
The government responded with force, but the people stood firm.
This day would mark the beginning of a new chapter, either for liberation or for further repression.
The fate of Burkina Faso hung in the balance. Madame Yarrow, once a loyal insider, took a bold stand. In a live Pan-African broadcast, she held up the original uranium contract and confessed, "I signed this document under threat. The president sold our children's future, and I was complicit." Her voice trembled with remorse but was fierce with resolve. She named names, exposing the web of corruption and coercion, and called on the National Assembly to invoke constitutional powers to remove Traoré. Her confession was a turning point, shaking loyalists and emboldening moderates to join the call for accountability. The National Assembly became the stage for a political battle. Pro-Traoré loyalists tried to delay proceedings, citing national security concerns. But after Madame Yarrow's dramatic broadcast, moderate MPs shifted their stance.
The speaker invoked emergency powers and called for a no-confidence vote. The tension was palpable as the votes were tallied. When the motion passed by the narrowest margin, the capital erupted in cautious celebration.
Traoré was ordered to resign within 72 hours or face impeachment, a deadline that would soon shake the foundations of the regime.
As the political crisis escalated, France began quietly evacuating embassy staff and covert operatives.
Leaked internal memos described the situation as irreversible and hostile to French interests. The French government's retreat signaled a loss of influence that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles.
Meanwhile, the streets of Burkina Faso filled with chants not only demanding Traoré's removal but also a call for full decolonization. The uranium deal was merely the spark. Now, the people demanded the fire, a new era of sovereignty and self-determination.
Under the protection of regional observers, Aminata returned triumphantly to Burkina Faso. At the airport, thousands greeted her with flags, songs, and tears of joy. No longer just a blogger or activist, she had become a national symbol of resistance and hope.
At the podium, her voice was soft but unwavering. "This was never about me," she said.
"It was about truth. Justice. And all of you made this possible."
Her return marked a new chapter for the movement, one rooted in collective power and shared dreams. Colonel Zongo refused to surrender quietly. Mobilizing loyal military units, he launched a desperate bid for power, declaring martial law and seizing key military bases.
Explosions rocked the capital as checkpoints went up and tensions escalated.
But General Cohn was prepared. His forces quickly moved to suppress the coup attempt. By dawn, Zongo was captured while trying to flee to the Ivory Coast. His arrest was broadcast live by citizen journalists, signaling the collapse of one of the regime's last strongholds.